Picture this: an army, starving and surrounded. A city with walls that can't be breached. Outside, a massive relief force is closing in for the kill. Inside, the soldiers are trapped, desperate, and dying. By any military calculation, their situation isn't just dire, it's hopeless. Annihilation isn't a risk, it's a certainty. But what if their greatest weapon wasn't a sword or a shield? What if it was faith? Throughout history, armies have marched into battle absolutely convinced that a higher power was on their side. These are the stories of warriors who, against all odds, put their fate in God's hands, and somehow emerged victorious. Our first story kicks off in 1098, during the bloody First Crusade. A massive army of European knights had marched for months, burning with a desire to reclaim the Holy Land for Christendom. Their target was the ancient city of Antioch, a fortress so tough it had shrugged off countless sieges. After a brutal 9-month siege of their own, the Crusaders finally broke through the walls, but their celebration didn't last long. Almost immediately, a huge Turkish army showed up and besieged them. Just like that, the besiegers became the besieged. Food ran out, morale hit rock bottom, and the once mighty Christian army started to waste away from starvation and despair. It was in this moment of sheer desperation that something incredible was announced. A humble monk named Peter Bartholomew came forward with a wild claim. He said he'd had visions of St. Andrew, who told him that the Holy Lance, the very spear that pierced Christ's side on the cross, was buried right under the floor of the city's Cathedral of St. Peter. The leaders were, to put it mildly, skeptical. The Pope's own representative, Bishop Adhemar of Le Puy, openly called it nonsense. But to the starving soldiers it was a flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness. So, on June 15, 1098, they started digging. After hours of finding nothing but dirt, just as everyone was about to give up, Peter Bartholomew himself leaped into the pit and pulled out a piece of iron. It was immediately hailed as the Holy Lance. A wave of religious euphoria swept through the army. The men saw it as a direct sign from God that they hadn't been abandoned. Their morale was instantly transformed. Filled with a renewed, unshakable conviction, the emaciated Crusaders prepared for battle. They fasted for 5 days, just as another of Peter's visions instructed, truly believing victory was promised to them. On June 28, the city gates swung open. The Christian soldiers, many of them little more than walking skeletons, marched out to face a well-fed, much larger enemy. With the Holy Lance carried before them like a sacred banner, they charged. The ferocity of the Crusaders was terrifying and unstoppable. They fought not like men expecting to die, but like men who were guaranteed a divine victory. The Turkish army, completely baffled by their suicidal courage, hesitated, broke, and then fled in a full-blown rout. The impossible had happened. The Crusaders had won, and those who were there credited the victory not to military genius, but to the miraculous intervention of God. Section 2. The Hammer and the Crescent, of course. This wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last, that a Christian army would look to the heavens for a bailout. Centuries earlier, the very future of Europe was hanging by a thread. By the early 700s, the Umayyad Caliphate had expanded with breathtaking speed, storming across North Africa, conquering Spain, and pushing north over the Pyrenees Mountains into the land of the Franks. The advancing army, led by Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi, seemed unstoppable. They rolled over armies, sacked the wealthy city of Bordeaux, and continued their push into the heart of Gaul. A key target on their list was the Abbey of St. Martin of Tours, one of the richest and holiest Christian shrines in all of Western Europe. In this moment of crisis, one man stepped up. Charles, the mayor of the palace of the Frankish kingdom. He gathered an army of veteran infantry, but he was at a huge disadvantage. The Umayyad army was mostly armored cavalry. The Franks were almost all foot soldiers with no armor to speak of. Knowing he couldn't win a straight-up fight, Charles did something brilliant. He chose the time and place for battle, positioning his men on a high, wooded plain between the cities of Tours and Poitiers. The terrain was perfect for disrupting a cavalry charge and giving his infantry a defensive edge. For 6 long days, the two armies stared each other down. Ibd al-Rahman, a smart general himself, was hesitant to order an uphill charge against such a strong position. Finally, on October 10, 732, the battle began. The Umayyad cavalry charged again, and again, and again, but they could not break the disciplined Frankish infantry square. Arab sources later described the Frankish soldiers as a wall of ice, standing immovable against the relentless attacks. Charles had drilled his men to hold their formation no matter what, a tactic that would prove decisive. As the battle raged, a rumor ripped through the Umayyad ranks. The Franks were attacking the rear of their camp, where all the loot from their campaign was stored. Panicked at the thought of losing their wealth, many fighters broke off from the assault and raced back to protect their camp. This caused total chaos. In the confusion, Abd al-Rahim was killed trying to rally his crumbling army. As night fell, the fighting stopped. The next morning, the Franks braced for another attack, but the enemy camp was eerily silent. Scouts soon discovered the Umayyad army had retreated during the night, leaving everything behind. Charles had won a stunning victory against a superior force. His triumph at the Battle of Tours is seen by many historians as a pivotal moment that stopped the Islamic advance into Western Europe. For his unyielding resolve, Charles earned a nickname that would echo through history: Martel the Hammer. His victory wasn't just a military success, it was seen as a defense of Christendom itself. Section 3. The Winged Hussars descend. Let's fast forward nearly 1,000 years to 1683. Once again, a shadow is falling over Europe. The mighty Ottoman Empire, at the peak of its power, has marched to the heart of the continent. An enormous army, possibly as large as 170,000 soldiers under Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, is laying siege to Vienna, the capital of the Habsburg Empire. The city's defenders are hopelessly outnumbered, with only about 16,000 men on the walls. For 2 months, they endure constant bombardment and savage attacks. The city is starving, its soldiers are exhausted, and the walls are about to be breached. The fall of Vienna seems inevitable, and if it falls, the gateway to the rest of Europe will be thrown wide open. But help is coming. Pope Innocent XI helped pull together a Holy League, a coalition of Christian powers to face the Ottoman threat. The King of Poland, John III Sobieski, honoring his treaty, marched his army south. Along the way, he stopped to pray for victory before a famous icon of the Virgin Mary. He then took command of a combined relief force of about 70,000 Polish, Austrian, and German troops. On September 12, the Allied army positioned itself on the hills overlooking the Ottoman siege camp. The battle raged all day, with the Christian forces slowly grinding the Ottomans back. By late afternoon, Sobieski was ready to unleash his ultimate weapon, the Polish Winged Hussars. Before the final assault, the deeply Catholic Hussars held a holy mass. Then, around 6 p.m., the order was given. Sobieski himself led a charge of 3,000 of his elite heavy cavalry. In total, 18,000 horsemen thundered down the hills, the largest cavalry charge in history. The ground shook, and the sound was like thunder, adorned with massive feathered wings on their backs that created a terrifying, otherworldly screech as they charged. The Winged Hussars looked like avenging angels descending from heaven. The psychological impact was devastating. The charge smashed into the exhausted and demoralized Ottoman lines, shattering them completely. The Hussars' long lances broke their formations and created pure panic. Within hours, the battle was over. The Ottoman army was in full retreat, and Vienna was saved. King Sobieski, in a letter to the Pope, tweaked a famous quote from Julius Caesar, writing, "Veni vidi visit, I came, I saw, God conquered." The victory at Vienna was a decisive turning point, marking the beginning of the end for Ottoman expansion into Europe. These stories of faith and history are incredibly compelling. If you agree, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you don't miss our next deep dive into the past. But perhaps the most foundational story of a people putting their fate entirely in God's hands doesn't come from a medieval battlefield, but from the pages of the Old Testament. It's the story of the Exodus. For centuries, the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, suffering under the brutal rule of the Pharaoh. According to the book of Exodus, God chose a man named Moses to lead his people to freedom. Through Moses, God unleashed 10 devastating plagues on Egypt, each one a direct challenge to Pharaoh and his gods. The Nile turned to blood, swarms of locusts ate the crops, and a terrifying darkness covered the land. The final plague was the most horrible, the death of every firstborn son in Egypt. The Israelites, however, were told to mark their doors with the blood of a lamb, so the angel of death would pass over their homes. Shattered by this last plague, Pharaoh finally broke and ordered the Israelites to leave. An estimated 600,000 men, plus women and children, walked out of Egypt, but it didn't take long for Pharaoh to change his mind. Regretting the loss of his entire slave workforce, he gathered his army, including his 600 best chariots, and chased after them. He trapped them against the shores of the Red Sea. With the sea in front of them and the most powerful army on earth closing in behind them, the Israelites were terrified, certain they were about to be slaughtered. But Moses told them, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, ... The Lord will fight for you." You need only to be still. Then, God placed a pillar of cloud between the two camps, hiding the Israelites and stopping the attack. As Moses stretched his staff over the water, God sent a powerful east wind that blew all night long, parting the Red Sea and creating a dry path with walls of water on either side. For hours, the Israelites crossed through the sea to safety. When the Egyptian army charged in after them, God threw them into a panic, causing their chariot wheels to break off. As the very last Israelite reached the other side, Moses again stretched out his hand. The walls of water collapsed, crashing down on the entire Egyptian army. Not a single soldier survived. The crossing of the Red Sea is the ultimate story of divine deliverance, an entire nation saved not by its own strength, but by placing its complete trust in the power of God. From a Crusader's holy spear to a Frankish wall of ice, from the thunderous charge of the Hussars to the parting of the Red Sea, these accounts are so much more than just war stories. They are powerful testaments to the incredible role that faith has played in human history. For these soldiers and peoples, God wasn't some distant observer. He was an active participant on the battlefield, their shield, their strength, and their ultimate path to victory. These armies were armed with steel and iron, but they were forged in belief. They marched straight into the face of certain death, absolutely convinced that something greater was on their side. And in doing so, they didn't just win battles, they shaped the course of history. It leaves us with a profound question. In the crucible of conflict, how much of victory is won by the strength of our arms, and how much is won by the strength of our soul?